All right,
That's
so
true.
Jack 9 suited. So looks like you limped here. Oh yeah, this guy's pretty good, right? The guy in the big blind. Euro, is that right? Strategy.
I'm not actually sure about this. Like, I think, like, well, I want to play this hand, and so I'm limping. And if he's like raising, I'm still gonna call. But if I raise and he three bets, I'm just gonna fold, I guess. So that's why chose to limp there.
Yeah,
I
yeah, you
guess.
definitely, you're right that this is a hand Jack 9 suited that, realizes a lot of equity by seeing the flop. So I'm with you. We do want to see the flop. I'm just not sure how often. I do think limping here is totally fine. I think you can raise here sometimes too. I don't think he's going to three bet you a ton off these stack sizes, I'd assume. Like I think
Yep.
he flats a lot and I think a flat's good for us, right? So I wouldn't worry
And
about it too much, but I think it's fine to do both here.
I've seen that people don't like to three bet in blind versus blind. That they just don't do it. I'm like,
They
I don't know
call a
if
lot.
yeah, they call a lot. And honestly, I don't think that people bluff from a big
But
blind if
but
they have position.
Yeah, what do you think here, Marco?
no, but if you're saying that, what does it lead you to do with Jack 9 suited?
I
If you don't think
raise.
they,
I should raise, but
you should raise 100%, right? Like,
yeah,
and
If
if
they're
they
not
three
three
bet,
betting, yeah.
basically it's a probably a fold. Like,
Yep.
I mean, it's such a good hand, but like if they three bet nothing, it probably becomes. I mean, Jack 9 suited might be still like borderline call, like even versus really tight range, because like, but yeah, I think it's like borderline call maybe. But like if it's super tight range, but yes, I think you're right. We should open like everything which is good, like King 10. I'm never limping, like because like you said, if they three bet me King 10 off, snap fold. Like you don't even need to think about it, right? So it's kind of easy.
I
yeah.
also like
So
what Marco said about the whole idea of like when Yuho makes an observation, that sounds right. Marco goes, okay, so what does that mean? What do we do? So that's how you take general observations and then you turn it into like actionable moves. You know what I'm saying? You think, okay,
Mm.
well, if people aren't three bet bluffing here, therefore we need to be raising here more. You know what I'm saying? So like that's just great logic. What were you saying, Yuho?
yeah, I think this was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm not sure when this
Mm.
session was, but I think I just realized that people don't really like to three bet from big blind, so that makes our like range more like happy to three bet. I mean raise pre-flop.
And it's so funny you say that too, because Marco and I actually had this conversation earlier. We're discussing exactly this thing, and I was saying how I came up with this little pie chart adjustment deal. How the idea is that when you're in the big blind, you're facing a raise. You can only do three things, right? You can flat, you can fold, and you can three bet. And at the moment, it seems like most of the population is just like flatting, like heavy flatting. Like we all see it on TV now. People raise smaller. People are better. Like it makes sense. People are calling more, right? But if you want to, again, a big part of poker is being ahead of the curve, zigging where people are zagging, right? And if everyone's calling a lot in this spot, well, that means that maybe we should call less. And if we call less, that'll have us three betting more and folding more, right? So if, I think that it's funny that we're saying this because I do love, for instance, like if I was that guy, strategy, and you 3x'd here, and I had something like some of the bottom end of my hands that I want to defend with there, maybe like ace two off through ace seven off, like king five off through like king nine off. I might just three bet bluff with those hands because of exactly the logic we're talking about here, right? As opposed to calling. So just consider doing a little bit of both from the blind there, and your logic is perfect of like addressing what people are generally doing. Just keep using those ideas, and then that's how you come up with your strategy to exploit them essentially, and that's all it's about.
Yeah. I think like optimal game theory would limp here. I think, but
Because
I'm
you're
not.
going to be exploited more by strong opponents in the big blind if you raise, right?
I
Yeah,
think this hand
yeah,
would be still open actually. Like basically you open like exactly like Jack 8 suited, Queen 8 suited, King 6 suited, 8 7 suited. I sent a file here what you would
Nice.
open from a small blind. Um,
Love it.
but yeah, this because it's such a good hand that you can still call three bet. You do. I think you don't want to open Queen 7, Queen 5 suited because it's a hand you don't really want to call three bet. I think. So this is still like fine. This is of course GPV and environment, so maybe it would be different answer if we would look at this from like that we only have one tournament life, right? It's always different answer if you look at like that you only have one life, right? Like, I mean, that changes things in life as well. Like, would you take a risk which will kill you 10% of the time, or not take a risk for 0% of dying? It's a little bit similar.
And we got to remember this is a $5 guy too, a guy in a $5 tournament too. So we don't want to like give him too much credit. So I think in spots like that, typically raising is going to be the better play. But I like where your head's at, that if you think it is like more of an elite opponent, then I think limping is totally cool.
I think this was one of the bad hands, or tricky hands at least.
Oh, and it is exactly how it worked out too. It's funny. Yeah, definitely just check call.
And always be careful not like snap calling the raise. I don't know, maybe you have it faster, but like when you snap call, it's easier to identify your hand. It's exactly Jack 9. Like what you would snap call is Jack 10 off, Queen 10 off, or like, it's like, if you would consider even second, maybe, you could have aces, like maybe you could have something like, if you have aces, you're not snap check calling, for example.
Yes.
Like I'm just saying, like I think snapping is kind of bad. It's a bad habit in general. I know Belthuis, I think he always plays snap tactic, but I think it's terrible.
It's funny. I just thought about Lex Belthuis because I was like thinking like, isn't that like quite bad to do that? But then I saw him doing it, and I was like, maybe it doesn't matter that much.
No, it definitely.
That much, I think.
It definitely matters. Marko's 100% right. So like this is like one of my like the things I look back on like all of my years of playing high stakes. And one of my biggest regrets is not taking a little bit more time in certain spots. I also think back to some of the most elite players. The 10 best players in the world, if you go watch them, none of them are snap doing stuff like that. None of them would ever do that. They are deliberate. They take their time. They think about stuff, and it scares you while you're watching it too. It's more intimidating that way. Like the longer you take, don't like Hollywood and waste time, but like, if you're on the button or you're in the big blind, like if you're in one of the pressure points, or if it's a decision like this, just take an extra like 10 seconds. It will make you look, it'll give you time to think about what you're doing for one, because we should always do that. And then also just like make you look a little more methodical, I think that's a good thing. So absolutely. I like what Marko's saying, because when you snap, you just never have aces there. I think it looks more like suited connectors, lower end broadways, ace X suited, small pairs, like, it's just very capped. It's just never a monster. But if it's like this tank call, like maybe there's the chance you have this ruse going on with like ace,
It's same, I think, the psychology as well. Like when you see people snapping, actually, this is very important. I think when somebody bets and you snap fold, I don't think you want to do that. Always give the illusion that you're going to raise. Like I always take some time to give the person not that easy feeling like you bet and he falls snap. You know that I'm never snap folding, and it's like psychologically easier to bet against me when they are not snap folding. Like it makes difference. Like when you think about like psychologically, if you know the villain will bet most of the time, but I'm not snap folding, he doesn't get those snap folds what he wants with his bluffs, for example.
Yeah.
It's like it just makes it easier to bet against you if you're snap folding. I think that's a big difference, to be honest. Because
I agree.
If I see people snap folding, I mean some people have auto fold on my c-bet versus my c-bet. They just fold inside. I'm like, okay, I will snap. Or they have from the big blind snap fold, auto snap fold from the big blind, so they defended the big blind. So I know I'm in raise from the small blind every hand because they have auto snap fold. So there's a lot of things which can mess up the game if you have snap actions or something. So
I like it.
It's kind of funny.
Seconds is big. I've told this story to a bunch of guys too. I've told this to Marko, but I just had one hand that just like really like ruined me for like eternity, and it's all because I made this decision. And it was a huge hand. It was at the 5K buy-in tournament at the Hard Rock, 10 million guarantee about like 5 or 6 years ago. They had a $2 million overlay. It was just, I don't know what they were thinking. Do you remember that tournament, Gary? Like they advertised for it really big and stuff that year. It was really huge.
Yeah,
and so monster. It was at the end of day one, and I had kings, and Daniel Strelitz, who is a buddy of mine, he won a WPT, really good player. He opens under the gun to 2,400. I 3-bet to 7K under the gun +1. Everyone folds. He calls. The flop comes out like Jack 10-8. He checks. I check back because I think that if I get check raised there, it's just a nightmare. And then the turn to 4, he bets. I call, and the river is another 8. He checks, and I don't even think about it, okay? I don't even think. I just go like, my brain is just like, okay, he checks, I has best hand, let's bet for value. So I bet 13,000 into a 30K pot, just figuring for thin value because I didn't think he could be that strong. And then he's just like sitting there, and I could just like feel like the like, wheels in his head turning. And then immediately I'm like, God damn it, Grayson, what have you done? That was not a good bet. And then he just check raises to like 32K with like 15,000 behind. And I was just like, oh God. And I ended up folding. And then I asked him later what he had, and he told me that he had ace queen. And, you know, that hand really killed me because I thought in my head the only bluffs he could have would be ace queen, king queen, and I'm blocking king queen. And then there were several value hands he could have that could conceivably take that line. But that's neither here nor there. The issue is that there was 30K in the pot on the river. I didn't think. I took 5 seconds and I bet 13K for value. If I had took 15 freaking seconds, I could have thought about it, looked at his stack size and seen that he only had 48K. I could have just bet 20,000. If I had bet 7K more, like 5 blinds more, if I just bet that, he couldn't do what he did. Like I opened a door for him to make a bold play. And like you can do that against weaker players who won't pull the trigger and do that. But if it's an elite player like that, like my mistake was not taking my time and then making that bet, giving him a window to do the move he did. And he did it. And he made an awesome bluff. And I busted the next level. And I feel like I paid the price and lost a lot of equity because of that decision, you know, and all I had to do differently was bet a little bit more. And like, if I had just taken 15 seconds, I would have probably figured that out, you know? So like, don't do auto decisions as poker players. I think we all have good instincts, and it's normal for us to want to act fast because like we have quick brains, we make decisions fast, and we're confident in our decisions. And that's cool. And use that. Like I'm the same way, but like an extra 15 seconds is not going to hurt you. If in fact, it's going to help you a lot.
Mm-hmm.